It was a cold December night on the island of Sodor. Henry was getting fired up to pull a train the workmen called the Flying Kipper. Henry used to be a poor steamer, but ever since he'd been taking Welsh coal, he was able to take long journeys to the mainland with the Flying Kipper. Henry loved it. It made him feel like a really useful engine. "Okay, Henry," yelled the driver. "All we have to do is rearrange the turntable, and we'll be on our way." Little did Henry or anyone know what was about to happen would change his career forever. Driver, why isn't the table moving?"
"Oh, bother," responded the driver. "The turntable won't budge. We'll likely be stuck here until morning."
Henry looked very sad, but his driver tried to comfort him.
"Cheer up, Henry. It wasn't your fault. Ice and snow forced the table to stick. They'll just have to send another engine to pull the Kipper tonight."
The only engine available was Gordon. He hated pulling goods trains and wanted to get the job done as quickly as possible. Gordon's signal was down up ahead. "Good. The sooner I'm done with this job, the sooner I can get home." Little did Gordon know that ice and snow had forced the signal down. Much less did he know of the goods train waiting on that line. The next morning, the Fat Controller came to inspect the damage. Luckily, Gordon's driver and fireman had jumped clear before the crash, but Gordon was badly damaged. "Ugh, the signal was down, sir." "I know, Gordon. This wasn't your fault. Nonetheless, you'll need repairs. I'm going to be sending you to Crewe, a fine place for damaged engines." "Yes, sir." True to his word, the Fat Controller sent Gordon to Crewe for repairs, but it took much longer than expected. James and Henry had to take over express duties in Gordon's absence, but due to Henry's deteriorating health, James had to cover most of the trains. Despite his best efforts, he wasn't able to keep up with the timetable. Another engine would have to be called in. You're replacing me, sir?" "No, I'm not replacing you, Henry. Just reassigning you. James and the new engine will take care of the express services while you handle smaller jobs." "But I pulled the express before. All I need is a tender full of Welsh coal." "I know, and I was proud of your work, Henry, but I could barely afford the Welsh coal as it was. And now having to pay for Gordon's restoration, I just can't afford it. The best I can do is a small delivery every month of Welsh coal. If we mix that in with the normal coal, that should be enough to keep you in operation. Do you understand, Henry?" "Yes, sir," said Henry doubtfully. Just then, an engine Henry had never seen before rolled up to the sheds. She was a Stirling-class engine. "Ah, Emily, my new express engine. Welcome to Sodor." "Hello, sir. The pleasure's all mine." After Emily arrived, Henry's worst fear became a reality. Henry received less and less important jobs. Henry had gone from pulling passengers to light goods to shunting duty. He also noticed that less and less Welsh coal was delivered every month, until eventually there was hardly any being delivered at all. Eventually, Henry was only let out of the shed to be a back engine, or when a train had to be took and there were no other options. Henry felt sad, cold, and alone. He hadn't felt this way since he was locked in the tunnel. He knew his decline in service wasn't Emily's fault, but he would often give her a cold buffer if she ever tried to speak to him. After all, she was the engine that replaced him. Henry's hostility towards the Emerald engine would eventually come to an end after he broke down pulling one of the very few goods trains he was still allowed to take. Emily, who had been going down the same branch line, came across Henry and offered to take him to the goods yard to be looked over. After she rescued Henry, they became firm friends. But all the same, Henry missed feeling like a really useful engine. In the following months, Gordon returned from Crewe. and one day was asked to take a goods train. Gordon hated this. His driver didn't understand why Gordon would hate taking a goods train. Many engines believe that it was because Gordon simply didn't like pulling goods, but some believe that Gordon was secretly afraid of having another accident. Regardless of his reasoning, Gordon didn't want to take the goods train and was willing to do anything to prevent pulling it. So when he was being turned around, he tried to jam the turntable. Then everything happened at once. One moment Gordon was on the rails, the next he was down in a ditch. Gordon may have avoided taking the goods train, but he was stuck in the ditch for the rest of the day. As the sun set, Henry and James arrived to pull Gordon out of the ditch. Through hard work and determination, James and Henry got Gordon out of the ditch. But Henry would always find it sadly ironic that while trying to avoid an accident, Gordon would cause himself to have an accident. To add insult to injury, the Fat Controller had been considering Gordon for a very special job. But now that Gordon had disgraced himself, the Fat Controller looked into other engines to pull the train. It turned out that the special was pulling the Queen's train from London to Knapford Station. Many engines were considered, but by a special request from Emily, Henry was ultimately selected to pull the royal train. The Fat Controller was hesitant. He knew a run like that would require a lot of Welsh coal, but he decided that Henry deserved a treat. So, with a tender full of Welsh coal, Henry made the journey to London and back with the royal train. When asked about the experience, he said it was the best run of his life. It would also be the last major run of Henry's life. Even with the Welsh coal, such a long run had done a lot of damage to Henry's inner workings. With a heavy heart, the Fat Controller had to take Henry out of service. Henry was hurt by this news, but accepted it. But this wasn't the end for Henry. The Fat Controller had no intention of scrapping such a kind, determined engine, so he gave Henry a proper retirement. Henry became an exhibit, similar to what you'd find at the National Railway Museum. Many people visited Henry on a daily basis. Some came to admire him, some came to ask him questions about his life story, and some simply came to see one of the original 3 railway engines. But regardless of the reason, Henry became somewhat of a fan-favorite engine. This may not have been the way Henry was expecting his career to go, but being able to make hundreds of men, women, and children happy just by giving them a smile, that was a nice way to spend his retirement. But every once in a long while, when Henry dozes off, he dreams of being a large, strong engine, much like Gordon, rushing down the line. But to Henry, that's only a dream.